Welcome to the Leadership Puzzle. I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci, co-founder of Evolve HR Solutions. In this project, we're taking a journey to uncover the mysteries of leadership with some of the world's most accomplished leaders. In each episode, we discover the distinct insight from each of these great leaders, enabling us to refine our leadership skills and become more effective leaders. Piece by piece, together, we will assemble the leadership puzzle. One of the capabilities leaders struggle with is being selective with your yes. In other words, what battles should you fight? Which ones should you walk away from? Well, our guests will provide some practical ways we can look at this leadership puzzle piece. Today, I'm interviewing Mike Schaffer, the founder and CEO of Echo Factory, a Los Angeles-based advertising agency. And he has some great lessons learned through the hard knocks as a startup, but they will absolutely be relevant to every leader listening. I found his insights invaluable, and you're in for a great interview. As always, our podcast is sponsored by Evolve HR Solutions, a global HR consulting, recruiting, and software company dedicated to meeting all of your HR needs. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining me today. It's really great to have you on the Leadership Puzzle.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here and appreciate the invite.
Yeah. Mike, I love how we first met. I think it was really just fortunate. And can you share your side of the story of what you remember of our first engagement?
Yeah, happy to. And I'd actually love to hear your version too and
Yeah.
compare notes. But for me, it started with just a phone call. I got a phone call from you and someone on your team needing help with a project for a specialty materials company that was going through an acquisition and needed help with the name and rebranding and really just working with the executive team to figure things out. And I feel like we just really hit it off right away, and it felt like such a great culture fit for myself and my team with you and everybody at the company. And so, I think that was my first experiences. On the first couple of phone calls, it just felt like a great fit culturally. And then being able to understand right away, there was some pretty big asks around timing and deliverables. And I think the culture piece that felt so good is there was some real concerns that I had about hitting those, and the concerns I came with, here's the recommendation to get through them, and you were able to assure me that those would be handled, and they were, and it was just such a great positive experience right from day one.
One of the things that really jumped out was how you said yes. We wanted to come up with a global name, not just some little localized name, but a global name. What was it, like 3 months?
Yeah.
We had talked to 2 or 3 other agencies that we were interviewing, and every single one of them were saying, "Oh, it's a year at least a year. If you really push it, 9 months." But you said no problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what was so fun about that particular project is, and maybe the approach that we take that's a little bit different from other agencies is they were 100% right that scale of a project does take a year. That's just how long it takes. And what we discussed is, I believe a lot of that time is taken because there's a lot of back and forth and revisions and changes. And one of the things we discussed is, great, we want to be able to work with the CEO and hear directly from them and the executive team. What are they looking for? We want to work very closely on revisions if you want to hit this timeline. And so we really looked at this business problem as the business problem is it needed to be done in 3 months. How can we achieve that versus how do we get a name? Well, a name takes a year. It was just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And I think, that was the common thing that we both could really rally behind.
Now, shifting gears a little bit, you have a fairly unique path that got you into the advertising world. You started out in photography, right?
Yeah. So I started as an advertising photographer, built a small business out of that with a couple of employees, and very quickly realized that there was such a bigger opportunity for the companies that I was working with the skill set and the network I have to just offer a lot more services that were customized to their business problems. And the path really came from me enjoying creating marketing materials and thinking about the problem solving and just taking it a step further than just creating images, but also figuring out where should this image and messaging go and what should it say and how is it attracting the right kinds of customers. And so I just found this opportunity with a couple of the early clients that I had. I did the photography business for about 5 years before starting the agency. And so I worked with a number of agencies, and I saw how I saw a little bit how they were operating, and I thought I could do it better by offering a customized approach versus similar to the naming opportunity, having this templated approach that naming just takes a year. Instead, looking at the business problem and saying, okay, the business problem is it needs to be done in 3 months. What do we need to do to make that happen? And that's really how I made that transition.
That's great. It's interesting to me because you've been really an entrepreneur from the beginning, from the start. You're now working with much larger firms that don't have that same entrepreneurial, let's get it done kind of spirit. How do you balance that? Come on, guys, let's go from their kind of systemic plodding along decision making process.
It's a really good question. I think the easiest way for me to explain it, and I hope it's a good one, is when we're working with clients, whether they're large or small, we really focus on making sure they're the right client for us
Mm.
and somebody that we can work with. Culturally, it fits, expectations match, capabilities, what they're looking for with what we can offer, making sure that that all matches. That's probably at the base the most important piece, because if we're working with whatever size company, if the expectations don't align and the culture, understanding of how the process is, if those don't line up, it usually doesn't end well. And so just from the bat, trying to figure out, is this a company that I believe in, and the roadmap that they're laying out that they have, is that something that I think I can help support with marketing efforts? And so that's probably at the high level. And then as I drill deeper and deeper into working with these clients and teams on the client side, it's really just being candid and really making sure people understand the context of what's going on. Hey, this is going to take longer because it's got to go through 6 different layers of approvals. It's just the reality of it. And if you know ahead of time, or hey, it needs to go through 6, but it's going to be rerouted so it can be done fast. It's just setting those expectations ahead of time is what I find to be the best.
So it sounds like you've maybe chosen not to work with a potential client that you just didn't think that you could get along with.
Yeah, I definitely have. It's a skill set that I've learned, relatively recently. In the last couple of years, I've gotten much more disciplined about it, and it's had a huge impact on, my business and my team culturally and health wise in general. Because if I don't think I can help them, I don't want to spend 6 months, a year working with a company or client or a team to find out that was just a waste of time because like we expected, it wasn't going to work. You never know for sure, but there's some signs that typically you'll see, like, does it seem realistic? Or if it's not realistic, do we think the product is right? Do we think there's a product market fit? Like some basic questions that just give us a small understanding at the start.
I want to pivot a little bit and start digging into your leadership puzzle, right? We believe that every leader has this unique picture that's created based on who they are and their experiences as a leader. Now, Echo Factory is what, 15 years old now?
Yeah, 15.
What a great journey. Was there a particular leadership characteristic that allowed you to transition from photography to become an advertising agency? What was that leadership characteristic that allowed you to be successful as you took on that new challenge?
I guess looking back, doing the transition from photography and running a small photography business to starting an agency, the biggest characteristic that I would describe is trusting people on the team and their capabilities and what they said they were going to do. And that trust is probably the biggest characteristic that I've worked on. It's something that I continually work on because I like doing things myself. I like getting in the weeds. And so I am very conscious to let the team figure things out as much as I can. And then I think there's another big pivotal moment for me about 5 years ago that I think is probably the most crucial in my journey. And that's when I found a mentor advisor that I could work with, and really somebody that I looked up to and said, this person is very successful in the way that I want to be successful. I like the way that they operate, and them reciprocating and saying, I like the path you're going down. I'm willing to help guide you. And I think having that mentor advisor to get guidance from has been probably the most pivotal thing for me for my leadership.
Now, perhaps that mentor was the one that said, yeah, you should not go after every contract.
That's exactly right. That's one of the first things that they told me is they said, you need to start saying no to some of these things. You're killing yourself and your team chasing these really small projects that are using a ton of time and resources when you should be spending them on these things they're going to have a much bigger payoff for the clients and for you as an agency, and your team is going to be much more satisfied. And we've made huge progress and continue to work on that. But that was one of the first pieces of advice that they gave me.
That's great. Now, you mentioned trust with your team and building that trust on your team. I imagine it's difficult when you go to your team and say, yeah, we could have got this project, but we're not going to take it. How did you lead through those emotions from your team who might go, well, wait a second, that's work for us?
So I think that's a really good question. I would say most of the time, my team is already in agreement that we should not work with a client or project. And it's usually me pushing through, no, it'll be worth it. It's going to work. One thing that Echo Factory has never had a real problem with is finding new clients and new business. We've just been very fortunate. And so being able to say, the team would say, hey, we did the analysis. This does not look like it's going to work. It does not look like this is worth it for a number of reasons. And so it's actually flipped where the team is saying, oh, thank goodness we didn't want to work on that because we don't believe in what they're doing. We don't think it's going to be successful. We don't think they have enough budget. They don't think whatever the reason is. So I think it's actually different for me because I get riled up like, no, like work is work, right?
Yeah.
And so taking that step back and listening to my team has been really huge.
I could imagine your team when we were first talking about, helping my organization out. They were going, no, Mike, no, don't do this to us.
That's exactly right. It was the conversations of 3 months is not long enough. And I was saying, no, I think we can do it for these reasons. And ultimately, I think in this instance, what got people excited was the commitment from your team and the company to, we actually ended up flying out to North Carolina for a number of weeks, working directly with the leadership team, having multiple meetings a day, going across the hall, talking to the CEO, and having that was one of the difference makers, because if we hadn't had that opportunity to go in person and meet and have that long amount of time, not just an hour here or there, that gave the confidence to the whole team. And I think the back and forth collaboration helped sell them once we got started on the project. But at the beginning, it was pretty split between the team of, is this even possible? Yeah. And should we take this on? And so as a leader, really, I have to make that call and say, I think this feels like the real deal. Let's go give it a shot.
I think one of the things that I appreciate most about you is you have this mindset that anything's possible given the right context. So where do you think that mindset comes from?
I appreciate that. That's the perception, because that's what I believe to be true too. Where that mindset comes from, I don't know exactly. If I were to guess, it's, I only know entrepreneurship. I've never worked for a big company. I've never been, I was working hourly minimum wage jobs before I started my photography business. And so I think I just get excited and I love what I do. I'm very fortunate, to have a job that I absolutely love. And, I've created a job for myself that I love. And I think that's probably a big part of it is, I'm a big believer in you're in charge of your own destiny and you get to control, your path forward and the decisions you make. And so I think just having that from a very early age, I started my photography business when I was like 20, 21. And so it's just at that age, it's like the sky's the limit. And so I've just only ever lived that mentality.
How do you ensure that your team has that mindset as well as you're engaging on a new project or activity?
It's a really good question. And I think it's something that I definitely work on quite a lot. And I haven't perfected it by any means. But the approach that I try and take is to get the right people on the team first. I've had a lot of really great world-class talent at the agency that weren't necessarily the right culture fit for that reason. Even though they're excellent at what they do, just didn't quite fit. And so we are very intentional about the kinds of people and the personalities and the work drive and those kinds of things from the team. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle. And it's something that my mentor advisor really has given me a lot of guidance on. And then beyond that, I think culturally, agencies have a reputation of doing 60 or 80 hours a week, and you just burn through people. And in the last 5 years, I've really put a big emphasis on not having that kind of culture
Okay.
and trying to set the business up to be a profitable, successful business without burning through, people doing 60 or 80 hours a week every single week. It's going to happen. We're in a deadline driven business. But if a regular work week is the normal and a 9 to 5 is the normal, it's a lot easier to ask people to put in some extra time because there's a deadline or there's an emergency. Where I think the industry that I'm in has a culture of you just bring in some junior people, you burn through them. When they move on, you bring in another, and that's a big thing that we're
Yeah.
fighting and working on.
How is it that you are able to attract these great talented individuals, but more importantly, retaining them is even more challenging? So what's your secret sauce on that equation?
You know, that's something that I work on quite a bit as well. It's actually a KPI that I have is employee retention.
Okay.
It's not always been good. In the early days, we would burn through people, and as I've set these expectations of, look, we're going to have normal working hours. We're not, unless there's an emergency, and sort of setting up some of those standards has been really helpful. Being upfront of what this job actually is. Echo Factory operates in a unique position within the advertising and agency model and marketing model where we don't always do the big sexy projects that a lot of creatives or agency people get excited about. We work in these B2B industries that are very successful businesses usually and need help in some certain ways. And it's
Right.
not always work that it's not for Apple or Nike or Netflix or Disney
Yeah.
where you get to have a big ego with your friends. Instead, what I find is we understand really clearly, or try to understand really clearly, what our clients' goals are, and so we use that as our
Right.
metric for success of, hey, whether or not we can brag to our friends about this client and the work we did is less important than, hey, we know as a team collectively, we hit the objective, we succeeded. And I think that goes a long way because, that's everybody's trying to get something out of their job and being able to say, look,
Right.
we were successful. It may not be the most innovative, creative that's going to win big global advertising awards, but what it did is move the needle on a business, and that's the metric that's all we care about.
Yeah. So you had earlier in Echo Factory's life, you won a couple of Addy Awards.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I started the agency, advertising awards and creative awards were very important to me and to the whole team. We won for a couple of years. We won some big awards, and what I realized is that's really good for marketing an agency. There's zero that the work that won those awards made any difference or impact on the business of
Interesting.
the client. And because that was from early on, that was the goal is, look, we're trying to make impacts on businesses. We're not trying to win creative. We actually stopped entering in any creative awards or any advertising awards maybe a decade ago. For that reason is, look, you know, like I mentioned before, historically, we don't have a big problem bringing in new clients because, they see the work we do, referrals, now, all of those things happen. So using an awards show as our marketing tactic has never been our goal. And what I found is
Right.
that doesn't always align with the client's goal. Sometimes the client's goal with CMOs or marketing directors or VP of marketing, they need those to prove that's a proof point for them to their leadership
Yeah.
team. And that's one of the cultural things that we look like. If you're trying to win a big creative award, we could probably do it. But if it's not going to move the business, then that's not really a good project for us. And I've been on both sides of the award side, as a judge and as a person submitting work. And there are some award shows that really look into the metrics, but many of them, what I find is, they look at the work for 2 seconds and check, is this award worthy or not? And there's
Right.
usually so much more context and thought and rationale behind the decisions that were made. So I don't know. I can go on a
Yeah.
whole rant about why awards are silly for what we do. I would
Nice.
much rather say we saw a 200% growth in year over year for this company than we won a global creative award. They can go hand in hand. They can both happen at the same time. But my
Yeah.
team in Echo Factory is much more focused on, let's see provable business results from the work we did.
Sure. I'm actively engaged in the Dallas Fort Worth startup community, being an entrepreneur myself. And I've run across a lot of entrepreneurs who struggle to get their ideas off the ground. You, on the other hand, now are in your second successful. But as an entrepreneur, you face those roller coasters of ups and downs. And any advice you have on other leaders for overcoming that challenge of either running or leading?
There's 2 points that I can really highlight, and they're almost contradictory. One is you have to be flexible enough to shift to make sure there's product market fit and what you're doing the market actually needs. And I
Mhm.
think that's an early thing that entrepreneurs and startups need to figure out. The other is, which is kind of contradictory, but you also have to be able to stay the course when things look rough or uncertain. You have to believe in it enough to not change too much and too fast and be knee-jerk reaction to things. So finding that balance is really hard. I'm in a fortunate position in both the two companies that I started, they're service based. And so it's very reliant on us providing a service to support our clients and acting as a part of their team, and so we like to call it a marketing department in a box where a company will bring us in and they can bolt on this extra marketing effort. A typical entrepreneur that's not a service provider, they really have to say, is this product going to fit? I'm pretty involved in the innovation community here in Southern California,
Sure.
and specifically even in Pasadena where our office is. And I see so many times good ideas that people could really benefit from, but there's not a way for them to necessarily be revenue generating or profitable opportunities.
Sure. Yep.
And sometimes I think early stage founders, they focus, rightfully so, they have to focus on where's the next fundraising coming from. And so
Right.
that, there's, you have to market to fundraise and you have to market to get the product in front of people, and balancing that is really hard. And I think it really comes down to product market fit. And I think some really good advice that I heard a number of years ago, marketing will help a product fail faster if it's not a good product. And so if you start
Oh,
really
interesting.
marketing a product and it's not working at all, and you test and you try, it might be a bad product or the wrong market. And so that was some, and it kind of helped me understand when to say no for clients and projects for the
Yeah.
team is, hey,
Sure.
this may not be, it's being proven, and we've seen it a number of times where we're working with an early stage company, a tech startup, and we get 6 months into it, and the advertising is ramping up, and the data is just showing that something needs to change with the product, and that can be a hard thing for entrepreneurs to
Yeah.
actually follow through with, is adjusting it.
Because it's their baby.
It's their baby.
They think they know the
It's their
answer.
baby. Yeah. Well, and as an early
You
entrepreneur, you have to do so many things yourself. And so delegating and being able to listen and say, I know this is, you have to have this unwavering belief in yourself and the product you're developing. And so hearing somebody say, I think for these reasons, it may not be a good fit for this market, or the timing is not right, or whatever the case
yeah.
is, being able to have an honest look at that and say, hey, am I going to waste the next year or two of my life and my team's life on something that may not actually work? Or am I going to spend the
Right.
next year or two with our team working on something that has a high likelihood of success? And being able to understand that
Right.
really at a base level is key, I think.
Uh, I think grit or resilience as a leadership character has come into focus, especially since COVID. But I think this founder or entrepreneur, they have, bucket.
Yeah, and gosh, I feel like, I'm fortunate in my entrepreneur journey to have focused on service-based businesses, which are extremely hard in their own right, but they're hard for very different reasons that I've only seen from the outside. I've never been a founder of a tech company or a tech platform but I've been
Right.
involved in those companies at the executive leadership level. It's a different challenge that it's not for everybody. And, the people that are up for the challenge, it's amazing to watch it happen. And it's really easy to rally behind that excitement that they have and help support them. That's the part that I really enjoy.
So awesome. So you've given us sights on your leadership puzzle. Now a little fun. Let's move on to our light. So if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, what would my superpower that I would like to have is probably being able to see into the future, like predict the future.
Okay.
I spend a lot of my time looking into what does next quarter look like, what does next year look like, budgeting, forecasting, pipelines, backlogs, all of that. And so being able to it's something I work very hard on, but it doesn't necessarily come very naturally to me. And so
Yeah.
I rely on, a lot of people on my team to help support with that effort. But I think being able to have clarity on what does next quarter look like, what does the next year look like, what does the next 5 years look like, if I could have a superpower, that would be my choice.
You could certainly with gambling on
Oh man,
on football games.
yeah, I would just yeah, that's the other benefit.
All right. So, what's the best meal you've ever had in your life?
So this is one that's not technically a meal, but maybe about 15 years ago, my wife and I went hiking in Yosemite and hiked Half Dome. We did it. We didn't plan for it. We went to Yosemite and we're hanging out and said, what should we do tomorrow? And we decided hike Half Dome, not understanding what that actually meant. And so we went hiking, and on the way down, so it's about I think it was 12 or 13 hours, something of hiking. And on the way down, we didn't have enough water. And we stopped by a creek and borrowed another hiker's water filter and filtered some water. And that water, I still remember how amazing that water tasted. After 12 hours of hiking and just being so thirsty, I still think about how wonderful that water is. So not really a meal, but it definitely did the job.
Great. Well, you're in Pasadena, and you have a unique thing that you do on New Year's Day. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so our office is actually right on the Rose Parade route. And so we're one of maybe two buildings that have a balcony that overlook the parade. And so we actually have a party for our employees and their families, our clients and their families. We've turned it into a bring your own, a BYOB potluck kind of thing. And so people, we have coffee and mimosas and food, and we just have a fun time hanging out, watching the parade. And we've done it now for about 10 years, and it's something we look forward to. And if you've never seen the parade, it's something special to see in person.
That's great. I've been on showing up on your step one of these New Year's days.
Yeah, we got to do that.
Now, I know you love coffee,
Uh-huh.
and I've been told that you're right in smack dab in the world's best specialty coffee market. So what's your favorite?
That's a great question. Before COVID, if you asked anybody, they would tell you Blue Bottle, and I would tell you Blue Bottle. That was just, one was here, it opened, and I was going there very often. That's my favorite. And they have one called the New Orleans, which is, I forget what's in it, but there's a special ingredient.
Maybe chicory.
It's got chicory in it. That's right. Once COVID hit and we really started working from home, I had never really been a big make coffee at home person. But when COVID hit, I became that person. And so now it's whatever my wife buys me. And so I'll just have a random new coffee, some special blend that she found somewhere, whether it's a local or, And so I drink that, and it's more of a surprise every week or so when a new bag arrives.
All right. What one unique attribute, your puzzle piece, if you will, what is it that
I think the unique attribute I bring to the team is really around my excitement and faith in what we're going to do, and what I'm asking them to do, what I'm asking myself to do. The excitement around that, I think, can be contagious. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. If I start believing in something and thinking it's possible, I'll run through walls. And sometimes it's difficult, but that's really the thing that I like, and I think my team likes, but you'll have to ask them.
Okay. Speaking of which, what do you think they would say your unique attribute?
I think what they would say is my ability to network and find clients and companies that believe in us and the mission that we have of doing great work for good companies. And so I think that's probably what they would say is, being able to just network and talk to people and companies. When it's a right fit, they really believe in us, and when I believe in them, that connection is probably the thing that they would say.
All right, I love to give my guests a chance to tell our listeners about something that's important to them. So, maybe tell us a little bit about Echo Factory, or even something that you do, some local sharing. But so I'll handle.
So Echo Factory is a marketing advertising agency that really focuses on business results and creating custom approaches to find solutions to business problems that use marketing for the solution. What I think is unique and really enjoyable is getting involved with the community, whether that's volunteering. I'm very active in the local innovation community, and whether it's venture side, entrepreneur side, I'm very, very active there. And I think that's something that's very unique about us, and I think very special, is the people here. Even though we have team members across the country, we have a core here local to Southern California, and having those roots and being a part of the community versus just being a business. I'm fortunate enough to live and work in Pasadena. And so I think that's a special piece, and I love being involved in, especially on the private equity and venture side, and the deals that are happening and understanding the market in that sense.
So your Echo Factory website, is it echofactory.com?
Yeah, there's a dash in there. So Echo-Factory. So don't forget about the dash.
Echo-factory.com. There you go. All right. Thanks, Mike. One last question and we'll let you go. What advice would you give our listeners on, really implementing a leadership strategy to help them grow their own capabilities, whether they're leading a small team or
the one piece of advice that I would give is the advice that I took and has worked really well for me. And that was find either an advisory group that you can work with and share ideas and collaborate, or find an advisor that you can bounce ideas off of and hear feedback, and somebody that's going to be honest and critical, or a group that's going to be honest and critical. I've been in a number of them, but that's the one piece of advice that I think really transformed my journey, is finding somebody that's successful in the way that I want to be successful, and in all kinds of different ways, not necessarily in the industry. The mentor that I have, it doesn't come from an agency background. It comes from running very large, successful businesses. And the approach is what I believe in, and I get excited about. And so that would be my one piece of advice, is find a really strong mentor or advisor or advisory group, or somebody that you can look up to and say, I want to be like this. Let me make some of the decisions. They've already learned from their mistakes. Let me learn from that as well.
That's great. Mike, thanks so much for joining the Leadership Puzzle. It was great catching up with you. And again, thanks so much.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Thanks again, Jeff. It's always a pleasure working with you, and I'm excited, to join here and give my little bit of advice, and hopefully it helps somebody.
What an amazing interview with Mike Schaffer, who shared with us his leadership puzzle piece of being selective with your yes. I'm sure you got something out of it. Thanks again for tuning in. And just a reminder, it helps us if you subscribe, like, and add your comments below. We are on all of the major podcast platforms and social media. shown in the banner. Now, for the next couple of weeks, we will be launching episodes on a weekly basis, but once we get into the new year, we'll move to an every other week launch. But you're not going to want to miss our next episode, where we have Deshaun Weiss-Porter, the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement with Hilton. Here's a snippet from my conversation with her.
So I think, for me, diversity is a fact. It's visible and invisible attributes, traits, characteristics, and it refers to the presence of varying identities. For me, I think there's no inclusion in the absence of diversity.